7:03, and I would like to call the, September 9th meeting to order. Oh, I forgot the date. Okay, so first things first, we have lost a member. One member resigned. Bob Jacobs has resigned. So there's now one less of us to move forward. And other than that, Vanessa had to run to a doctor's appointment with her child, so she will not be on right now. She may join us in a bit. But Chelsea's taking the reins.
I'm so sorry, y'all.
So, Brian, have you reviewed the minutes?
Yes, I did. And as you know, I wasn't in complete attendance at the last meeting, but from the time that I attended and the follow-up review of the information, I believe the minutes are correct.
Great. Okay. No corrections, and they stand approved. Chelsea, I don't believe there was any comments. Did you get anything? Any public?
None. Amber, can you confirm?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that because Brian had to leave the meeting early, I had Pam review the meetings, the minutes as vice chair, and she did make one small correction, and she did approve them. And no, I did not receive any comments.
Okay, good. So we are now open for new business. We are going to review the education and experience draft that we discussed last time, and we have compiled everybody's comments. We've compiled everybody's comments to be able to move forward in a more concise way, and hopefully we don't have to spend so much time on this today since we put it all together, and we can start talking about other items. And just a reminder that we have to get all of this done pretty quickly so it can be presented in the November commission meeting. So Amber, I think you had the slides now, correct?
Yes. Are you speaking about the comments and the slides that were just submitted just a little while ago?
I think Vanessa sent you some slides that I did.
Yes, let me pull them up. I'll share my screen, yes.
While Amber's pulling those up, do you mind if I mention a few housekeeping items?
No, that's great. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, and this is primarily stuff that you know, but I just want to remind you, I promised Vanessa that I would. The first is that if you're not talking, then please mute your mic just so that we don't get all the background noise. And then if you wish to speak, feel free to just speak up, but if you prefer to raise your hand, I'll watch for those raised hands and try to kind of help people insert those questions in. But then lastly, please don't use the chat function for anything substantive. If you need to leave early, you could say, bye y'all, I'm taking off, or you can talk through logistic things there if you have a technical issue, that type of thing. But no motions in the chat, no substantive business, because this is a meeting that members of the public will be able to watch, but they don't have access to the chat unless they're literally on this call. But that flies in the face of open meetings. So with that, I think that's all the housekeeping. Any questions on that front? Okay, I will now mute my mic.
Okay, so we're going to discuss the recommendations for the education experience requirements for an individual real estate broker's license. Maybe, Amber, if you could go back to the other supplement that was sent today. There we go. Yay.
Is this right? Okay. I combined them into one, so sorry.
No worries. Okay, so we've got 5 responses for the survey that we sent out yesterday. And we've compiled all of the information into a chart in order to simplify the draft that that the staff came up with. So most everything they had in there is pretty much what we agree on. There were a couple of things that we had a little bit of dissension and that we need to kind of figure out at this point to see how to go forward. Most of us agreed on lowering the education requirement, but we all seem to want more experience. The question then is how much more experience? So everybody pretty much said the 4 out of the 5 years was too much. They would rather 3 out of 4 years. But then when we got down to how many sales are required for the experience, it seems like everybody wants some more sales. So we need to figure out how to make that balance in there. In my discussions with Vanessa and some others, we may be able to put, if we're lowering education, we may be able to push through a little bit more experience and still not go against the barriers to entry. So that's where we need to come up with some sort of idea of how to move forward. So these are the slides of everybody's comments on the survey that was sent. Yasmin, do you have your hand up?
Just a quick question and more for clarification for me. I tried to look through all my notes from the last meeting. How do we come up with 366 additional classroom? It just seems like such a weird number, and I don't remember seeing that number before.
Our responsibility is 6 hours.
Thank you. Okay.
There you go. Amber, you want to scroll down a little bit? We can go to the draft. Like if you keep going down just a little bit more to the draft. Okay, there. So on the draft, Chance said he's out of the office, so I don't know if that means he's not getting on or not. On the draft, on the draft recommendation, we all agreed with the 270 classroom hours that are currently there. We all did think that it could be explained a little bit better on the website. We did agree on the 366 classroom hours, but thought if the classes were taken at a college or university, they should be taken in the last 10 years to be relevant. And we all did agree on eliminating the college degree as automatically qualifying education. So then we could drop down to experience, and from the surveys in which we know we didn't get all of yours, most of the people said this time 3 out of the 4 previous years are more relevant to this draft. We were in agreement that removing the credit for listing agreements and buyer representation agreements was a good idea. We agreed that giving more credit for management experience was a great idea, and expanding TREC experience audit process. When we asked a couple extra questions in that survey, we did believe as a group that there should be more sales and experience points, and that the applicants acknowledge that real estate has been their primary job for 3 out of the 4 previous years. I believe if you go down a little bit, Amber.
It looks like Brian has a question. Brian Sales has a question. Brian.
Yeah, my comment is about the education must be in the last 10 years. And I tend to disagree with that. I don't know that education should expire. Degrees certainly don't have an expiration date on them. And then the hours that we get credited for education in the TREC database, those hours don't expire. So I don't know why we would require that the education would be required in the last 10 years. If I had real estate related education 15 years ago, I think it's still relevant.
Okay. Trying to see. where the slides are. Okay, Amber, one more down, I think. Okay, so this is where the where we measured the 4 out of 5 years and the 3 out of 4 years. So you see that most of the people decided that 3 out of the 4 years, which I may have made a mistake on here. So they thought 3 out of 4 years was correct in the survey.
So not too few.
I'm sorry. No, this is right. 3 out of the 4 years were correct, and they believe that 2 out of these are sales. I'm sorry. 3 residential sales per 4 years were too few, and 2.4 residential sales per 5 years was too few. And that is what we're required to have right now as the experience goes, if we're talking about experience. And also on this, the commercial sales, they believe, were too few. So that goes through these sales and experience. So we need to figure out a balance between if we want to use the 3 out of 4 years and how many sales or how many points should be required.
Hi, this is Soccer. I'm on my phone and my computer at the same time. I don't know what's going on, so I'll keep them both on. I was one of the people who filled out the survey, and my thought behind the 2.4 being too few is that if the people are going to say that they are selling real estate full time, this is their full time job, then maybe a sale every 2 months, 6 a year for a total of what would that be, 24 and 4 years? That would be maybe close to being full time. Because if somebody is full time, they can't really live off of, they're not telling the truth if they're saying that they're full time and they're only having 4 transactions a year. That's not full time employment in real estate. And I think our number of transactions need to relate closely to what a full-time job would be. So 6, something like that a year would be something that I would be okay with.
This is Brian. I agree with Soccer. I think given the feedback that you got, Leslie, from brokers and agents in your market and our previous discussions, really the experience speaks to a prospective broker's ability to supervise sales agents. And I think, and we've all kind of just agreed that experience counts at least as much as education when it comes to managing and supervising others. And so I really think we need to up the ante on the experience level. I agree what we're doing on education, but I think we need to increase the required experience.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
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 Okay, so then we just get down to how much more experience. Do you agree that it needs to be 6 sales per year? And should that be both for residential and commercial, or should it be different?
I should have mentioned on the front end that we have a few commissioners who have joined us for today. I know Chair Scott Kessner, if he's either joining or has joined. And then we also have Jason Hartgraves and Barbara Russell, 2 additional commissioners. Commissioner Russell has her hand raised. So.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are we only talking about residential? Because commercial, they may only make 1 sale a year. I mean, that's totally, you can't compare commercial and residential.
No, we just mentioned residential. Should it be the same for residential and commercial, or should it be different?
Okay.
I think we can achieve that by establishing, a required point level. Let's say it's double what it is now, 7,200, but then award more points for a commercial transaction as compared to a residential transaction. Therefore, you could achieve that experience level with fewer commercial transactions.
Is it the way to achieve that? Are we in agreement?
This is soccer, yes.
This is Bill. I really got a little bit of a problem, and maybe I'm missing the boat here. The experience and the education requirement are all have to be combined. They have to be considered together. These are not two separate things. And the whole deal to sit for the license exam for a broker is a building process. You're building on the agent's education. You're building on the agent's getting the license. You're building on the brokerage, the agent's ability to get more education requirements. You're building on their additional experience that they're having. Then you're building on they have to take another license, and then they become the broker, and then they're going to still be accountable to ongoing education requirements and ongoing supervision and professional ethics requirements. So again, why I don't, and maybe I'm missing the point. I don't understand why we have to tell people what they need to do. If they're building their resumes, if they're doing what they can do, if they've been working in the industry for 100 years, what difference does it make if they're selling one house or one shopping center or one piece of land a year or not? And again, it doesn't. I don't think it goes to the management, the education, the process of learning to be a manager. And that's what a broker is supposed to be a seasoned person, but we're trying to determine what we're going to allow somebody to just take the test. This is not the ultimate brokerage, final establishment of how you be a broker. It's just getting to the point where you can take the test. And if they don't know what they're doing, if they haven't gone through the process, if they don't have the education, if they don't have the experience, they're not going to pass the test. And if they do pass the test, they're still going to have to prove up once they get the brokerage license that they can be responsible and be productive and be market savvy in order to be successful in it. So I don't, maybe I'm missing something, but to me, it's a bigger picture. It's not just this one issue. And I think if we get too set on number of transactions, we micromanage what the experience is going to be. I think we're making a mistake for trying to allow people to get into it. Again, it's just a comment, and I certainly defer to y'all. Are very experienced. You're smart folks, and there's a lot of good minds in the room. So it's just another opinion from somebody who I don't think would be able to make the cut at this point in my life if I really wanted to do it.
Thanks, Bill. Yasmin, your hands up.
Yeah, just in response to Bill, I guess my concern and my thought process is just when you take the exam and you become a broker, automatically you can have 10, 20 agents underneath you. And if you don't have the experience to train them, to manage them, we are doing a disservice to the public. And that's the main concern. And I get that, well, you can learn later, but at whose expense? This is at the public's expense. If you've done one transaction a year, you become a broker, and now you're managing agents, you don't know what you're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And at the end of the day, the people that suffer is the consumer. And that's how I thought this through and why I think it does matter. And like you said, it's just my personal opinion. I'm just kind of wanting to throw that out there.
This is soccer. I agree with Yasmin.
Me too. I 100% agree. Brian?
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. And while, and Bill, I understand your point. I think we're not dictating the number of transactions. We're really saying, okay, you need to have some experience in order to supervise other sales agents. And those experience points can be accumulated a number of ways, certainly with numbers of transactions, but also by supervising and managing in an office and other sorts of ways. And that spreadsheet has a whole litany of ways that you can accumulate experience points besides numbers of transactions.
I agree. Anybody else have a comment? So our next feat is to figure out what is the correct balance for experience and how many transactions should there be. And that may be something we need to think about. Does anybody have any thoughts right off the bat?
Can you put that worksheet back up again? Please, thank you.
So did everybody agree that we're to or are we still doing as well?
I'm sorry, whoever was talking's broken up and I couldn't hear what they were saying.
Sorry, that I was just wanting to clarify if we have all agreed to change it to the 3 to 4 years versus the 4 to 5 years, or are we still deciding on that?
When we took the survey, which did not include some people because they didn't turn it in, we had, I'm trying to scroll up to that point. We had 3 people that wanted 3 out of 4, and we had 2 people that wanted 4 out of 5.
Can we take a vote on that, just so we can, once we have the amount of years, then we can determine what the amount of classes or transactions would be?
Sure we can. Amber, do you want to do that vote or you want me to do it?
Was that Soccer that just asked to take a vote? You could just simply make a
No,
motion.
that was Yasmin.
Yasmin, okay. You could make a motion and that could be seconded. There could then be discussion and a vote. That's kind of our rhythm.
All right, I make a motion to take a vote on deciding whether we're going to do the last 4 to 5 years or 3 to 4 years of experience.
Sorry, I'm sticking my lawyer hat on for a minute. So you wanted, what is your opinion on that? Because you would want to make a motion to do 3 out of the last 4 years. You'd make your opinion known and make that motion, not just a motion to vote, but a motion, however you, whatever your opinion is, and then we'll see if people agree with you or not, right? In the vote.
Got it. Sorry, my internet is not working very well right now. Can you guys hear me okay?
Anyone can make that motion.
Please.
I'll make the motion that we make the experience between 3 to 4 years.
This is Holly. I second that.
Aye.
Okay. So then you can have any discussion you'd like, and then the chair will call for a vote.
Just to clarify, so what you're saying is you have to get the experience credits for sales, they have to be within either the last 3 of 4 years rather than the last 4 of 5 years.
Correct. It's currently 4 of 5 years, and we are proposing to change it to 3 of 4 years.
And this is just for the sales, or is this for all of the experience credits?
This is the experience requirements on the experience report that applicants fill out.
The point, yeah.
So by reducing it to 3 years, is it going to be harder to get the 3,600 points or easier?
It'll be a year less to.
So it's going to be harder.
Correct.
So I would be opposed to it. I would say it should be 4 to 5 years so that we give people the opportunity to build those experience credits over a period of time.
This is Brian. I agree with Bill. I don't think that is broken. I think it's good to accumulate experience over time. So I think 4 out of the last 5 years is suitable.
This is soccer. I agree. 4 out of 5 instead of 3 or 4. So I vote against the 3 out of 4.
Okay. So the motion was to change it to 3 out of the last 4. So if you're ready to vote, what you can do is you could call for the ayes and the nays, Leslie, and see if this motion carries or dies. That's the wrong word, but
I get it. All of those that are in favor of changing to 3 out of 4 years, please say aye.
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 So was that 3?
Aye.
That was Holly, me, who else?
Pam.
Holly, Pam, and Leslie. Okay. All of those that are opposed, please say nay.
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 So it's 3 and 3.
do those nays with your name.
This is soccer. Nay.
Brian,
Yep.
nay.
Bill Roth, nay.
And do we only have 6 on this call?
We do. Chances.
And
If somebody.
I will change my vote. I'm okay with either one on this, to be honest. I would be okay with the 4 out of 5 as well. If we need a tiebreaker, I'll change my vote to nay.
Okay. So I think you have 4 nays. Yasmin, Bill, Brian, and Soccer.
Okay, so we will be leaving it 4 out of 5 as is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the next question is, do we want to change the experience requirements to require more sales in those 5 years?
This
This
is
is
Brian.
soccer. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, thanks, Soccer. I would move that we increase the experience point requirement to 7,200 to be achieved within the past 4 out of the previous 5 years.
I second that.
Can you just elaborate on your thought process on it? I'm just curious.
The reason
Why
I
that
feel
number?
that, honestly, it's just doubling what's there. I think our current requirements, education versus experience, the experience points for me personally were extremely easy to achieve. And I think, and therefore I think we should put more weight on the required experience, given the role of the broker as a supervisor over other agents. So the number that I picked is just double of what we have now. There's not a lot of science behind that.
That's 4.8
Right.
sales a year.
Right. So this is soccer. So that's basically 5 transactions per year. And if you are saying on the application that this is your full-time job, you should have 5 transactions in the year. If you are selling, a salesperson, because a salesperson is not allowed to manage until they become a broker. So if you're a salesperson and this is your full-time job, 5 transactions should be definitely doable.
Soccer, I would disagree with that statement. I think salespeople can be designated as supervisors without being a broker currently.
Currently, they can. I thought they had to be, if they were designated, they had to go through, yeah, that's right. If they're designated, they'd have to go to broker responsibility class
Right.
within their 2-year renewal. You're right. I stand corrected.
Does anybody else have any comments on that?
Yes, I'm sorry to be the gadfly, but I really think we're headed in the wrong direction. And again, it's by making more experience requirements. I think we're putting impediments on people, and if we're going to do that, then you got to expand your experience ability to have experiences, which means that if you're a broker if you're an agent for a long time, and even if you don't sell a lot of stuff, or even if you don't do a lot of transactions, but you're in the business and you've had a lot of experience, you should then give people credit for that. If they have extraordinary education experience, information, and you're going to make the experience more heavily, you should give people the ability to transfer out and get credit for extra education. In other words, the 3600 is a legitimate standard. It shows that people are trying to have experience. They've done transactions. They've been in management. They're doing stuff. I don't know why we have to make it real tough on people. And I know you're saying it's not tough, but it is. It puts a pressure on people to achieve things in a short period of time. And a person who again, I think we should be more inclusive, more accepting, and look at this as a composite of the whole thing, the education, the experience, and the thing. So again, I'm sorry to be the gadfly, but I really feel like the 3600 is fine. The 4 out of 5 years is fine. I don't think it's broke. I don't think we need to fix that part.
Okay. Oh, Holly, do you have something too? I see your hand up.
Yes, I have a question for our experts that are on the call with us. To change the point system, what does that look like on your end, staff?
This is Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. It's not difficult to change the point system. When I commented last time, I mainly said it as a point that, we'd have to update a lot of our forms and a lot of the rules that reference the way we kind of calculate the points right now. But it's not a burdensome type of change, especially considering that any of these changes are going to require, they're not going to be effective in 30 days. So we would have sufficient time to update all of the processes that we have in place. So whichever direction you guys go and then the commission goes, we'll be able to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Hi, this is Soccer. The points, doubling the points, I think is appropriate simply because we lower the amount of education that's needed. We took the education and we basically took the 900 hours, the extra 630 hours, and cut it in half. So we've already given the person who wants to become a broker an easier go of it, meaning that they have to have less education. So I think doubling the number of points and adding the question that says you're full-time, that is appropriate, because you can't lower the number of hours and keep the same level of experience or points, because we want the broker to mean something. We want the broker to be educated, because the broker is in turn responsible for the agents, and the agents and for the people who are interacting with the public. And it is our responsibility to protect the public. And we have to protect the public by making sure that the people who are practicing real estate know what they're doing. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, or are we ready to vote?
Call the vote.
Okay, I make a motion to change the experience requirements to 7,200 points within the 5 years. All those are in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Brian, yay.
Holly?
Yes,
Dr. Yay.
Yasmin, yay.
Dr. Yay.
Pam, yay.
Leslie, yay.
This is Bill. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to vote no.
Okay, you have six yays and 1 nay.
Also, well, not also, sorry, but maybe after this vote, do we also have to take a vote to remove the credit for the rep agreement?
Yeah, I'm gonna go down right now and go line by line of the draft, and we can vote on each of those lines and go from there. How's that? So we've already decided 4 out of the 5 years, so that was line 1. The second line was remove credit for listing agreements and buyer representation agreements, which everyone agreed on that sent the survey. So I make a motion to remove the credit for the listing agreements and buyer representation agreements. All those that are in favor, say yay.
Oh, sorry, Leslie, if you want to get a second for that motion.
Oh, can I get a second?
Dr. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say yay.
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 Any nays? Okay, motion carries. So the next one is give greater credit, 40 points per month for management experience and allow for management experience to obtain all points, no cap.
Can you say that one again, please?
Yeah, we heard the dog.
Sorry. Give greater credit, 40 points per month for management experience and allow for management experience to obtain all points, no cap. Does anybody have any comments?
Yes, Brian. 40 points per month in 1 year is 480 times 5 is 2,400 points maximum for management experience. So given our vote of 7,200, that broker candidate, still going to have to make up an additional 4,800 points. So I think the second part of that statement is misleading or out of line, or I don't understand it. I agree with the 40 points per month. I agree with increasing those experience points for managing others. But I'm not sure what the second part says.
Are you referring to the no cap or what part?
Would you read it again, Leslie?
Sure. Give greater credit, 40 points per month for management experience and allow for management experience to obtain all points, no cap.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Somebody can get all of their points just from management experience.
That's not going to happen because mathematically that's impossible. Yeah. Unless we increase the points to 100 or 200 per month or something like that, because they're going to have 48 months, and 48 times 40 is definitely not 7,200.
Or even 60 if they were managing for the full 5 years. It still still falls short significantly. So I agree with increasing the number of points for management experience, but just because the math doesn't add up, I don't agree with the second portion of that statement that all of your experience points could come from managing others.
And is there a way to possibly add different points for different amount of people they manage? You know, if somebody's just managing 5 or managing 50 or 100, they can get a different tier of.
I think I think that would be a question for our director of licensing who just spoke. I think that TREC allows designated supervisor. You can designate the actual agents who they supervise. So I think that's a number that can be tracked.
This is Denise Sample, the Director of Licensing. We actually aren't able to track that because it's not a sponsoring relationship. With a broker, we can easily capture how many sales agents are sponsored by any particular broker, even if they're the designated broker for a business entity. However, with that delegated supervisor flag, there is nothing that ties it to specific license holders, either a number of them or even which license holders are being supervised. We rely on the broker who sponsors that sales agent or that license holder to let us know when they've supervised other license holders and when they're no longer supervising license holders.
Right.
Okay.
So another mathematical way to make that happen is take the 7,200 points and divide that by 48 months, 4 out of the last 5 years, and I think you come up with a number of 150. So if you were awarding 150 points per month for managing, then that person could get to the 7,200 based strictly and solely on their management points.
I would suggest that we just remove the last sentence that says that they can get all their points through managing experience.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Because if they're a year in the business, this is soccer. If they're a year in the business, they're not going to be managing anybody. If they're 2 years in the business, maybe not even managing somebody, they might not start managing until they're in their 4th year, and then their sales go down because they're managing, but then they can still get points up to 40 points a month that will help them with their points.
Could I just ask for clarification? We're talking about the brokerage branch office or team management, not property management.
Yeah,
Is
not
that
property
correct?
management.
Okay, so this is just if you're managing an office, if you're managing a team of people, and you sort of been working that. Again, I think that it should be higher. You should get higher credit for being in an administrative supervisory sort of situation. And again, I don't know why there wouldn't be. If you're there for 5 years, make it 100 points and let a person get. If you're going to make it 7,200 points, give somebody the ability to get 5,000 or 6,000 points by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a comment?
I would just like to add that if you become a broker, you should have some face-to-face time with clients, not just managing. So I personally agree that somebody could get all the credits just based on managing agents, because there's a whole other side of it, dealing with the client, dealing with inspectors, dealing with all of it that a broker should be experienced in.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yasmin, do you want to make?
Doctor, I agree.
So Leslie, I think you had a motion on the table. It wasn't seconded. So you could pull that motion back and start again with a new motion, or if someone else has another one.
Do you want to make a motion, Yasmin, off of what you mentioned?
Apparently, I don't know how to make motions.
Don't worry.
You keep doing it. We're all learning together.
I'll let somebody else do it. I'm going to mess it up. I know it.
So how about this? We'll give greater credit, 40 points per month for management experience.
Period.
Is that what you were trying to say, Yasmin? And leave the rest of it off?
Yeah.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay, all those are in favor? Say aye.
Aye. This is Doctor.
Aye. Pam, aye.
This is Bill.
Brian, aye.
Holly, aye.
Leslie, aye. Are we missing anybody? All those that are not in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we're making our way down. The next one was expand Trek experience audit process. Does anybody have any comments?
Can somebody clarify that, what that means? I'm confused by that.
Sure, it's Denise Sample, the licensing director. Currently, our process is to review the experience report that's submitted with the broker license application against what we've got in our records as the active time periods for that license holder. So we also check that against the transaction listing that's provided just to make sure that those dates match up. However, we don't currently require proof of those transactions being performed or any kind of documentation. We do require a certification statement for the applicant and their sponsoring broker. So anybody who may have been sponsoring them during the previous 4 out of 5 years where they're claiming experience, they have to certify that that information is true and correct. So in response to some of the initial concerns that maybe the experience needs to be increased or just maybe reviewed a little more thoroughly, we kind of drafted a proposal that perhaps provides for something that we've set up previously on the appraiser side with reviewing that audit. That's a different program under a lot of very formal rules that are set up by at the federal level, but we could kind of mirror that and perhaps send the experience every 10% of applications that are received where experience and education requirements have been met and we are allowing that applicant to now sit for the exam. At that point, the application could be forwarded over to an investigator or someone else, on staff in the enforcement division, perhaps, who's got that experience, in the industry or knows how to look for compliance with rules and the statutes. And we could, maybe establish some kind of program like that if that was the desire of the group.
Denise, currently, when I did my application, I completed the form, which was complicated, but then I had to back that up with a spreadsheet identifying each one of those transactions by closing date, address, what type of transaction it was. So it was a pretty onerous process for me to document that, and then that had to be certified by my broker. I thought that put enough degree of responsibility on me as an applicant that I don't know that you should take up a lot more staff time to measure compliance if we're already getting that certified by another party.
I agree.
This is
I
Bill.
agree.
I absolutely agree too. I think we have the certification of the broker. We have to have some faith in the integrity of people doing it, and I think it's not cost effective, and it would be a lot of staff time to have to enforce something like this and go into this. Especially, this is just to sit for the exam. I agree with the other two comments. I don't think there should be any additional audit or special investigation for this kind of a situation.
Thank you. Denise, do you want to address that? Is it a lot of extra work or?
Well, we don't currently have any process like that in place on the Trek side. So, just based on our previous experience with what we mirror, because in our licensing division, I also oversee the appraiser licensing process. So just based on how that process goes and how thorough that is, it does increase the application processing time. So that's one consideration for the applicants. But we haven't quite, depending on if we start out with 10%, that might be a way to test the water, so to speak. So I don't really know. I can't speak to the enforcement staff's, resources and the availability of them to have, their investigators kind of review or audit the experience that's being claimed. But it would, just based on our experience when we used to just audit 10% of applications on the appraiser side, it did increase the processing time and does involve more hands reviewing each application.
Thank you. Chelsea, do you have anything to add? Okay, does anybody else have any comments? So we need to decide if we want to keep that in or take it out. And the wording was—
I make a motion.
Okay, go ahead. Yay!
I make a motion to remove the added expense.
I second it. This is soccer.
All in agreement, say aye.
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 Aye. All that are not in agreement, say nay. Okay, we will remove that part. The one last part of the experience that we had was that applicants acknowledge that real estate has been their primary job for 4 out of the the 5 previous years. And I believe we talked about this a few minutes ago too, and I think Soccer had discussed that. Are there any other comments?
So if we're already,
Could I just
Go
get a
ahead.
clarification when you're saying, and again, I'm not trying to be argumentative, I really am trying to understand it, is when you're saying that it's your primary profession, does this eliminate people that are working 2 jobs that are doing real estate, really on the side? In other words, I'm not saying one. We've got a lot of experience requirements now. We've got education requirements that are still substantial. I mean, do we have to sort of ask somebody if this is their primary business or not? I think would be hard to quantify, and I think it's hard it gives a little bit of confusion to folks that may be doing other things, and I don't know that it really adds anything to the application that's not already sort of evident by the requirements that we already have in the application.
Thank you. When I researched what other states are doing, any states on their requirement list to become a broker asked them to testify that they are a full-time agent. And they also ask the broker to sign off that they have been working full-time. So,
And I think that's great.
I do think that is common.
Yeah, and this is soccer. And if they are going to be part-time, that is wonderful. Then they can remain an agent as a part-time agent working for, I don't know, working for the hospital, and they sell houses to all the nurses and the doctors whenever they want to buy a house. But their main job is they are, an RN with St. David's Hospital. That's perfect. That's wonderful. But you're going to remain an agent because this is not your full-time job. And a broker has a lot of responsibility, and the responsibility is to the agents and ultimately to the public. And that I believe that it needs to be full-time. And if they're not, then they can remain having this as their side hustle, and that's fine. But they have to remain an agent until they're ready to switch into full-time to become a broker.
Again, just as a question, it really is a question. Is it 100%? Is it 75%? Is it 50%? What does that mean, full-time? And I really do. I'm not trying to be smart about it. I really don't get it. I mean, if you're doing other things, I'm not full-time in anything, and a lot of people aren't full-time in anything. In other words, when I say full-time, we're doing a lot of different things in our lives. So again, right, I would just say it would be hard to enforce it. It would be hard to define it, and it's hard to make it accountable. I'm not saying that we don't want people who are experienced and are doing it, but I think we're putting in a definition that's hard to quantify. So I would just suggest that we don't need it.
Bill, several
I don't think that.
30 hours.
I'll go ahead.
States put in 30 hours a week. So when we discussed it the last time, people didn't want the hour requirement, so we changed it to a primary job.
Right. my money comes from real estate and not from something else. So I know, I mean, and have a broker certify that, then the broker's not going to certify that if that agent never has any transactions and does, you know, they're not going to certify that this person is can become a broker. And as an agent, part-time all day, every day. But I think as a state and as an industry, we have a problem with absentee brokers who have gotten their broker's license and they don't do real estate and they have no clue what's going on and our industry is an ever-changing industry. So I really think that for a broker's application, you need to be a full-time broker. Otherwise, remain an agent. That's just my opinion.
Yasmin, do you have something to say?
Yes, sorry, I got disconnected again. You know, if we have the requirement of the experience and somebody is going to meet those 70 to 100 hours of experience, that means that they are doing enough, good enough for, if it's good enough for anybody, like why say it's only good enough if you're saying you're doing this full time? I have a part-time agent that is running circles around my full-time agent. Like she's doing 3 times the business that they're doing. So again, if we have the point, if they're having the transactions that they need to have, why does it matter if they have another job? Like we're all entrepreneurs. Like we can have 3 or 4 businesses running at the same time. That's just my opinion on that. And to what Soccer said about the nurse, like what if she has the experience and just wants to get a broker's because she doesn't want to pay the split and she just wants to have her own business or his own business? I agree with Bill. I think if we have the point, why add something like this?
Anybody else?
It's Brian. I agree with Bill and Yasmin. I think it's unnecessary with the point level that we've already created for experience, and I think it just creates another hurdle to become a broker that may be unnecessary.
Anybody else have anything? So, sounds like we're probably going to remove it, but I guess, Chelsea, we make a motion? Is that?
Sure. You just make a motion to remove that requirement and then get a second. And then if you have any discussion, you can have it then. And then you can, Leslie, could just call for a vote.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
All those are in favor?
Aye.
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 All that are not in favor, say not nay.
Nay, this is Soccer. I think they should be full-time.
Yay for me too. Okay, is that it? Okay. So we've gone through all of the experience part of the draft. There was one part of the draft recommendation that is different than we had come up with last week or 2 weeks ago about classes, when classes could be taken. So from the survey, we had added classes that are taken in the last 10 years as part of a real estate program at a college or university. They count as all or part of the 366 additional hours. I don't believe we took a vote on adding in the last 10 years.
I'm opposed to this idea just because I think education does not expire.
I agree with Brian.
I'm going to agree with Brian after what he had said earlier.
Okay, so are you ready to make a motion to remove taken in the last 10 years?
So moved, Brian.
Does anyone want a second?
I second Holly.
All those are in favor, say aye.
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 All those are not in favor, say nay. Motion carries. That taken in the last 10 years will be removed. Okay. So it seems like we are ready for a new draft with everything today. And we did it in an hour.
Yay.
Okay, so are you all of you ready to move on to our next item on the agenda to discuss the possible licensing of out-of-state military spouses transferred to Texas?
Yep.
So I think we have a good background so far. So now that we have our draft for licensing, this may help us with part of the language for the military spouses current legislation. Jennifer, Denise, did you want to go over what the current process is?
Sure. Denise Sample. So the reciprocity for military spouses, it's a limited reciprocity that is allowed by statute for military spouses licensed in another state and moving to Texas. There are other sections of the statute that allow for other benefits for military service members and veterans applying for a license in this state who hold a real estate license in another state. But for the military spouse, they are allowed to practice real estate without obtaining a license if the spouse is currently licensed in good standing by another jurisdiction that has licensing requirements that are substantially equivalent to the requirements in Texas. Before they engage in real estate, they have to notify TREC of their intent to practice, submit proof of residency and a copy of the military ID card, and then receive confirmation from TREC that the license in the other state's been verified and that they're authorized to engage in real estate. They can engage under this provision as long as their spouse is stationed in Texas, but it also depends on how long their license in the other state is valid for, and it's for a period of no more than 3 years. The military spouse, TREC would issue a license number to anyone who falls under this provision, because from our understanding, you need a license number to get into the MLS and to actually perform real estate services. And that license would not be renewable though. The military spouse who practices under this limited reciprocity would also have to comply with all the statutes and rules in Texas. So our current process is to, when we receive a request and the supplemental form from a military spouse applicant, we review the requirements in the state that they're licensed in. If those requirements in the other state are at least 50% of the requirements in Texas, so generally speaking, number of hours and years of experience, that application is forwarded to our executive director for review. And this is because we don't have substantially equivalent defined in any real way. So then each request is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So we are recommending that this group define substantially equivalent the way it's stated in our rules to allow for consistent review of these applications. This helps not just the military spouses, but military service members and veterans looking for other kinds of benefits outside of this limited reciprocity. It also helps any prospective applicants to have this clear information, on the website before they apply. They don't have to call us, they don't have to submit it and then hope that, upon further review, they meet the requirements. It would help them when they're relocating to Texas and kind of researching what they can do in Texas. So defining substantially equivalent also would eliminate the need for us to continuously review other state requirements in case they change. And we are very thankful to Leslie for that research that you performed. It was very helpful. So that's kind of where our recommendation is coming from. Does anybody have any questions about the current process?
I do.
Yeah.
Is it the same for agents and brokers?
Yes, the language in the statute is for all occupational licenses. So it doesn't spell out brokers or sales agents.
And
so
even if they're coming from out of state and don't have any Texas sort of classes, it could be equivalent.
Yes, but without defining substantially equivalent, there are no other states we found that come close to our requirements.
Okay, and then one other question. Since we renew every 2 years, why is that license, and there may be no reason, issued for 3 years?
That's the maximum amount of time, and that's set out in that section of the statute. So that's not anything that we set.
Okay.
2 years would obviously work for us because we're used to 2-year terms, but.
I think Tony has something to say.
Oh, does he? All right.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to provide some clarity there. So it's a maximum of 3. The license can be issued, or the allowance to practice in the state of Texas is a 3-year max. But as Denise said, it's also dependent on how they're licensed in another state. So if they have an annual license, if for some reason that license were to expire, they could no longer do any, operate under a license in Texas based on that. They would have to renew their license, but the maximum they would be allowed to operate under this limited reciprocity, which is our term for this, is 3 years. So that's why Denise suggested a 3-year license, because it logistically makes sense for us to do it that way. But there would be some onus on the applicant or the license holder to make sure that they're keeping us up to date on where they are in the other state, should we ever provide a license for them under this statutory.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, it would be issued for no more than 3 years. So much like the reciprocity that's established on the appraiser side, we won't go beyond the expiration date of the license in the other state.
Right.
So that would be 3 years would be the cap. But if that license expires in 18 months, the approval would not be issued for longer than 18 months.
Right.
So just to see how the process works, I mean.
Hands up. Hold on a second. Holly, you had your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm unmuting.
Uh-oh, you're muted.
How many of those licenses do we currently have in the state of Texas?
None.
Practicing? None currently? None. Okay.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yasmin, your hand is up too.
Quick question. I was just curious, when as a sales agent, when they transfer or here, are they required to have a broker sponsor them here?
Well, under the limited reciprocity, that is a good question, but the fact that they are required to comply with our other requirements would mean that, but Tony might be better able to answer that question.
Yeah, we read that as they would be required to be sponsored by a broker. That's another reason. So they can practice, the way the statute works is it applies to any occupational license. So it's not specific to brokers or sales agents, it's plumbers and everyone else. But the way it reads is the person coming in under that can practice without a license, but they give authorization to the agency to provide a license. And in order for this to be, make any sense for someone coming in from out of state under our authority, they would need a license in order to work, and they would need to be sponsored by a broker. All of that, they'd have to comply with that stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Bill, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just trying. It sounds like in order to define what substantially similar is, or substantially, alike, couldn't the agency once a year sort of just figure out which states we will agree to? In other words, it seems like, based on Leslie's research, there was a lot of states that were way out of our range. There may be only half a dozen states or 10 states. Can't they just establish a list of those states that would be, valid, unless the person proves that those other states are, that there's some other changes by some other state. In other words, just establish what states we're already agreeing to, and if there's a state that's not on that list, then it's up to the applicant to prove that that state would be substantially similar.
Denise?
Yeah, I wanted to add that Vanessa Burgess and Tony Slagle and Jennifer Wheeler and I met and kind of looked over the research that Leslie had performed, because we were also thinking we'll come up with a percentage of the hours, and that'll be great. But with the other state requirements varying so drastically, our recommendation was to require 50% of the number of hours of education and 50% of the experience requirements for a broker license, for example, but then also require 4 specific qualifying courses: promulgating contract forms, law of contracts, law of agency, and real estate brokerage. That would get the applicant in total to 63% of the number of hours required of education. Then based on the draft recommendation that you guys have put forward, it actually gets them closer to 89% of the hours that would be required if your draft recommendation goes through. But just based on today's hours that are required, it gets them to 63% roundabout. And our recommendation for a sales agent applicant or defining substantially equivalent, would be to require 50% of the number of hours of education, and then plus 90 specific hours in the 3 courses of promulgated contract forms, law of agency, and law of contracts. And that would actually get a sales agent applicant to 100% of the number of hours required under the normal process for a sales agent in Texas.
So it allows them to get credit for their past work, but also get trained in things specific to Texas, which is primarily our contracts and fiduciary
and our agency. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is Jennifer, Education Director. I'll just chime in there, but those courses were chosen specifically, as Chelsea was indicating, to cover things that might be missed. It's very common for other states to have courses in principles of real estate, and they're more broad and far-reaching from state to state. But when it comes to understanding Texas contracts, Texas law, and the importance of agency and the fiduciary responsibilities, these are the courses that we felt really needed to be taken here in Texas to practice.
Tony?
Sorry, thank you. And this might have been missed by some of you, so I think it bears repeating that Denise mentioned it earlier. While the impetus to start this discussion is about the limit of reciprocity for military spouses, Chapter 55 of the Occupation Code deals with not only military spouses, but also deals with vets and active military service members. And there are provisions of that statute that also speak to what is, the term substantially equivalent. So whatever's decided here would also need, I think it would be difficult to have 2 standards. So whatever the substantially equivalent standard that's established, if one is established, would apply broadly to all 3 of those types of applicants coming into the state from another state.
Going to Holly's question earlier, there's nobody, how often does it, is this something that really needs to be legislated if we're only dealing with 1 person a year or 0 people a year? Why don't we just leave it alone and if that 1 person comes in, then the staff's going to have to do some checking on it. But I don't know that you have to change the whole world over 1 person or 10 people a year.
I think you make a good point, but the purpose of making the change is to open the door, to allow more people to qualify. It's very discouraging for these individuals to call and say, I understand a new bill was passed that allows military spouses to practice without a license. And we say, oh, yes, but there has to be a substantial equivalency and you're very far off. And basically no one satisfies that at this point. So bringing the standard to something that is reachable for the entity, for the population that the legislature was intending it for, is really the purpose of changing our rules.
So the issue is not that you're getting requests, but you don't know how, but you're not able to process it. That's why we have nobody. Okay. I thought it was the opposite. There was nobody calling on this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jasmine,
I think she's having internet stuff.
I was going to say that I do like the idea of those classes, as it makes all the sense in the world. I'm just curious, when somebody transfers, they usually don't get a lot of notice, do they, as military? Denise,
I can't really speak to that. You know, anecdotally, there are some of the questions we've received are people who still have a few months before they're going to be transferred, and there are others that, you know, we're coming next week. What do I need to do? So I think it varies, but we don't have data on that kind of information.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I would like to help our military as much as possible and make it easy for them as much as possible. If they're obviously sacrificing a lot, we can make it easy for them. So about those hours, I was just curious if they don't have a lot of notice, if the changes, for example, like have to take those classes, if they could even do it like after, like maybe, okay, you have to finish these classes within, the first 30 days or 60 days after you move to Texas, instead of requiring them to have it completed up front. But I just didn't know how much headway do they know that they're coming.
Well, and I do want to say that, when we came up with this recommendation, this is just a starting point, just to kind of get us going, because we were also thinking, yeah, let's find out which states are closest, or let's just set a percentage. And kind of once we dug a little bit deeper, it was a little more complex. So by all means, just think of this as a jumping off point.
Tony?
Yeah, thank you. And also just, substantial is someplace between 50% and 100%. Right now, we're as close to 100% as possible, and no one's coming in under that particular threshold. 50% obviously doesn't mean substantial, so it's where do you get from there? I think you make a valid point about people having some concerns about coming into a state and not being able to work right away. But I think there's also, just to throw this out on the back end, what happens if they don't complete that coursework, yet they're doing transactions or doing something and they don't ever meet that threshold? Then as an agency, there's a concern there as well. So not that it's a bad idea, it's just there'd need to be a workaround around that somehow if that was the motion moving forward.
This is Soccer. When military, my dad was in the military, but he got out by the time I was born. The military families are very precise and efficient, and if she's notified that her husband or he's notified that his wife is being transferred to Saline and they're going to live in the Round Rock area and they want to practice real estate, those classes are going to be available online, and they're going to work on those classes to make sure. They're going to call Check's going to tell them what needs to happen. Got to take the contracts, got to take the agency, and then they're going to work on those classes and take those classes so that when they do transfer, that they're able to practice. That's why they call in advance. I mean, as much notice as they know, we're coming tomorrow, then they're going to still have to work on those classes before they can practice. Because we do have to remember that our customer, the person that we're protecting, is the public, because we don't want someone who practices transactional agency, which is allowed in Florida, to transfer to Texas and say to a buyer, I don't represent anybody in this transaction, I represent the transaction. And that's absolutely incorrect according to the agency laws in the state of Texas.
I have a question, and I may have missed it. I'm kind of thinking of everything that we're doing as a package deal. If we work with education and experience, that kind of goes into the reciprocity and everything else. So if we're lowering our education hours to 366, if that's what we're recommending, we're pretty in line with a lot of other states. We may be a tad bit more. So going back to that 366 hours, couldn't we still say substantially equivalent? I mean, we're really coming down in our hours. I just don't know what we do about the experience requirement. So,
and I know this recommendation that we drafted was based on 636 total hours required for a broker license, and then the current requirement of 900 total hours. So, you know, most of them are obtained in order to get the sales agent license, and then in that first renewal, the additional 90. And so that's where that recommendation and the comparison was made. That's how we made that comparison.
Because if they don't
based on the
have
current
a
requirement.
broker, they can always go in as a sales agent.
And that is what a lot of the military applicants end up doing, because the broker license requirements in the state that they're licensed more closely match to the sales agent requirements in Texas.
Okay. Anybody else? Do anybody have any suggestions of how to move forward? Do you want to think about it and send your suggestions into Vanessa before the next meeting? Any suggestions on how you want to proceed on this?
Leslie, this is Tony.
Yes.
I think that last option is probably a good one, unless the committee wants to move forward. But I think that you know, this is kind of something you've just been told about, something you need to think about, and doing it in a similar way that you did before, where you provide some feedback to staff and the staff can compile it and bring it back to you. I think it was really good practice and really helped kind of iron out all the wrinkles before it was presented. So just wanted to give that feedback that really helped us out.
Yeah, I think that could help too. And we're missing some people on this call so they could weigh in as well. So
that would then allow you at the next meeting to consider all of your thoughts, ask questions, and then to lock down a recommendation at that point.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So the next item on our agenda was discussion and possible recommendation regarding real estate broker reciprocity.
Yeah, and Leslie, Denise Sample again, Director of Licensing. I'm happy to provide some information on our current process. We don't currently have any true reciprocal agreements with any other jurisdictions right now. So we also don't have a legislative directive to create a path for out-of-state license holders like we do for the military spouses. But you know, this would likely be last on the list, I would think, after we're able to kind of maybe create a path or shore up a recommendation for the military spouses, where we do have that legislative directive to kind of create a path. Then I think we could easily, you know, as Tony mentioned, come up with one definition for substantially equivalent, because that's the language that's used throughout all of those statutes in the occupations code, and maybe apply that to look more, and instead of like a true reciprocity, whereas you know, someone mentioned earlier, here are the list of states we work with, we could maybe work more towards a license portability, you know, kind of create that path of, here are the benchmarks. If you meet this number of hours or this kind of experience, then come to Texas and take this number of courses. That, from a processing standpoint, might be a better path forward. And I believe there's an Arello task force as well that's looking at license portability, as opposed to a true reciprocity type of agreement with a couple of other states.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding, and I may be wrong, in order to have these agreements with other states, like several states do, there has to be an actual agreement in place between Texas and that state. Is that correct?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can speak to that as well as maybe Chelsea could. Yeah.
That's exactly what reciprocity means. And we talk about reciprocity or license portability kind of in the same category of how we would recognize a license for another place. Reciprocity would mean that we had agreements with individual states. That's pretty burdensome. License portability would be that we have standards for which a license from another state would be allowed to be utilized in Texas, right? To some extent or another. Does that help?
It would be less burdensome to do the portability.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else have questions, thoughts?
Can we kind of do the same thing? I actually had sent like where we can discuss and send in our recommendation along with the military spouses. I had already sent one in with the initial classes and things of that sort, but I don't even remember what I sent in. I do remember one thing was that I really don't see why, if somebody's already passed the national exam, why they have to take it again. I think they should just take the state exam, but not take the national again. That's one of the things I remember from what I had submitted.
I will add that currently, if an applicant is coming in from another state that participates in the ARELO exam accreditation program, we will issue them a waiver for the national portion of the exam. And then they would only have to take the state portion.
Anybody else have any thoughts or? Okay, so Vanessa and I will get together and put together maybe another little form for everybody to fill out with their thoughts, so we can kind of go into our next meeting with some ideas of what everybody wants, so we can move forward like we did today in a timely manner. Okay, so the next is discussion and possible action regarding comments received on other broker responsibility working group items since the last meeting. Are there any comments since the last meeting? Okay.
No.
The next item is discussion and possible action regarding future agenda items and meeting dates. Our next meeting is October 14th at 1 p.m.
I did want to mention that Vanessa suggested potentially moving that meeting time, keep it on the same date, October 14th, but to start it at 10 a.m. and to basically go until you're finished, just to block a pretty good portion of that day. That may not be a very popular decision or suggestion, but the thought would be that this would be, I think it would be your last meeting you have before making recommendations to be submitted to the commission for the November meeting. So this is kind of your last shot.
So we would have to firm up our recommendation. We need to go over military spouses, and we need to go over reciprocity. Anything else to add, Chelsea?
No, I think you've got it.
Is there a reason why you'd want to start at 10 as opposed to starting at first thing in the morning? You know, to sort of, I mean, to do it, start early, and because that way, I mean, if we're finished by, unless, I don't know, just, you know, I think you
like start at 9 and finish by 1 or something like that.
You know, just it gives everybody, you're not killing our whole morning, or, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is at your discretion. We tend to start meetings at about 10. Just somewhere along the line, someone liked that, and I think we've stuck with it. But there's we can start as early as you would like, or as early as is agreeable by the group.
Chelsea, how about if when Vanessa and I send out our questionnaire about the 2 extra items, we put that in there as well and get their suggestions?
That's great.
Okay. Perfect. So that's what we'll do. We'll get your thoughts on that as well when we send out our little questionnaire on our last 2 items. Holly, did you have something to say? I couldn't tell. Okay. Does anybody have anything else?
Why don't we just go ahead and decide what time we're going to meet next time, rather than send it out in the questionnaire? I would move that we meet at 9:30.
Okay.
I agree.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I agree.
9:30, why not 9?
Okay, we're going to start at 9:30 on October 14th.
Okay.
So mark that down, and it is now 2:33 p.m. and this meeting stands adjourned.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great see you in a month.
Great job, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Great job, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.